Xiaoyubai is my so-called elder brother, but in fact, he is my childhood betrothed husband. After my father passed away, my mother was afraid that he would abandon us, mother and daughter. She actually drugged him and locked him in my room. As a result, it accidentally caused him to miss his true love, the woman who was the light of his heart, forever. Later, he locked my mother in the basement like a dog. He forced me to the point where I couldn't even seek death. And I was humiliated by him every night. We will never be separated in this life. Are you satisfied, sister? In a pool of blood, I opened my eyes again. I returned to the moment when he was pressing on me. Ugh. His burning hot body pressed tightly against mine, and dense kisses landed on the side of my neck. The iron chain on my ankle made a ding-dong sound as it collided with the impact of our bodies. Xiaoyubai choked my neck and smiled sinisterly. Xiaoyu, you're going on a hunger strike and attempting suicide, right? For every day you don't eat, I'll have someone torment your mother for one more day. I want to see if your body is tougher, or your mother, brother. I moved my eyes numbly and suddenly spoke. Xiaoyubai's action stopped abruptly, and his voice became even colder. What did you call me? Whether it was before or now, for more than 20 years, I had never called Xiaoyubai brother. Because I had known since I was a child that I would marry him when I grew up, so how could I call him my brother? But today, I wanted to. Brother. I faintly lifted the corners of my lips, and my eyes became more and more empty. It's been 7 years, isn't that enough? From the day Xiaoyubai married me and completely took over the company left by my father, this revenge-named hatred had lasted for a full 7 years. At first, I had tried to get a divorce, asked for compensation, and attempted all kinds of suicides, but in the end, I was forced to give up everything, because Xiaoyubai held my mother's life in his hands. If I was more obedient, my mother's life in the basement, which was like that of a dog, would be a little better. So, actually, I didn't mean to go on a hunger strike. I really couldn't eat. It turned out that the late stage of gastric cancer was so painful. Enough. Xiaoyubai pulled the corners of his lips sinisterly, pinched my chin, and poured porridge into my mouth. Xiaoyu, what you owe me can never be repaid in this life. Weren't you and your mother afraid that I would abandon you? I promise you, we will never be separated in this life. Are you satisfied, sister? I was forced to drink half a bowl of porridge, but then I couldn't help but vomit it out. Xiaoyubai's face became even uglier. He suddenly turned me over and pulled my long hair tightly. You don't want to eat, right? Fine, then let's continue. I was forced to kneel on the bed as he attacked me vengefully. I endured the double pain of physical and psychological tearing, until the bloody smell churning in my stomach could no longer be suppressed. Blood spilled from my mouth and splattered on the pure white bedsheet. Xiaoyubai's panicked voice rang in my ear, and he reached out to wipe the blood spilling from the corner of my mouth, but as a result, the more he wiped, the more blood there was. Xiaoyu, what's wrong with you? My body slumped down feebly. I looked up at the dazzling crystal lamp on the ceiling and smiled as if I had been released. Xiaoyubai, in this life, between you and me, we're even. Let my mother go, too. My head was so dizzy, but my body felt as if it was being pressed down by something very heavy. I frowned and slowly opened my eyes. What came into view was the familiar yet distant ceiling, and I couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Was I still alive? Where had Xiaoyubai taken me? It didn't look like a hospital, nor did it look like the bedroom where he had imprisoned me with iron chains for 7 years. Instead, it was more like the home where we had once lived. My pajamas were torn apart, and a chill came from my chest. A hand with distinct knuckles covered my chest, and my whole body trembled violently. I was so shocked that goosebumps appeared all over my body. My gaze hurriedly shifted downward, but I met a pair of crimson eyes. Xiaoyubai, who was obviously much younger, had blurred eyes and heavy breathing. One hot kiss after another landed on my chest. My mind seemed to be struck by a thunderclap, and I trembled violently. This was so similar to the night when Xiaoyubai was drugged by my mother. I looked around the room, looking at the familiar furnishings. I was almost certain that this was that night, the last time, because of my stomachache. I took the medicine given by my mother and didn't wake up throughout the whole process, so I couldn't prevent the mistake from happening. But this time, God showed mercy, and I woke up. Brother, calm down, look clearly. I'm Xiaoyu, your sister. Xiaoyubai's body froze suddenly. He raised his crimson and blurred eyes, looked at me blankly for a few seconds, and his brows were tightly furrowed. But I obviously underestimated my mother's determination to either succeed or find a way to succeed. She poured nearly half a bottle of high-proof liquor for Xiaoyubai, coupled with the seasonings in the wine. Xiaoyubai couldn't even hold on for 3 seconds in his sober state and was completely defeated. His palm moved down along my waistline step by step, and he eagerly and chaotically grabbed the edge of my panties. 3. Bang! I grabbed the glass bottle filled with wish stars on the bedside table and hit Xiaoyubai's head heavily. The glass shattered, and the paper stars folded by hand scattered all over the bed. Xiaoyubai's body suddenly pressed down on me. Then, he went limp and lost consciousness. I raised my head and gasped for breath. I closed my eyes as if I had survived a disaster. Thank goodness, thank goodness. There was a buzzing sound vibrating under the bed. I pushed Xiaoyubai away and tried to get up to find the source of the vibration. But unexpectedly, when my body was only halfway up, a whirlwind of dizziness swept over my head. The thing my mother mixed into my stomach medicine still took effect after all. I just felt my stomach churning, and a layer of black mist gradually covered my eyes. Before losing consciousness, I remembered what was vibrating: Xiaoyubai's phone. The one who was calling should be the girl he secretly loved in his heart. When Xiqing, oh, Xiqing is here. Are you here to find Yubai? Come on in, come on in. The sound of conversation came from outside the room. It seemed that my mother was greeting the guest. I sat up from the bed, holding my stuffy and painful head. It was already bright outside. The chaotic sound of footsteps was approaching my room step by step. Yubai is in Ayu's room. Ah, it's so early. What is he doing in Xiaoyu's room? My consciousness cleared instantly, and my heart skipped a beat. Oh no. 4. When Xiqing was our former neighbor. In one military compound, there lived 3 families: the Xia family, the Wen family, and the Ji family. Both Xiaoyubai and Wen Xiqing were the kind of other people's children. The two of them had been bickering, competing, and comparing their grades since childhood. From high school all the way to university, they seemed like sworn enemies who couldn't get along, but in fact, there was just that one layer of window paper left. Everyone knew that the purpose of my father adopting Xiaoyubai was to raise a son-in-law for himself in advance. So, Xiaoyubai and Wen Xiqing agreed that on the day of their university graduation, they would confess to my mother. He would repay the kindness of my family for raising him, but he would never repay it by marrying into the family. As a result, Xiaoyubai was so drunk from the liquor my mother poured for him and was also drugged. He never answered the phone. When Xiqing was worried that something had happened to him, so she came to the door in person the next morning. Then, she was deliberately led by my mother and witnessed the surprise of the messy bed. When Xiqing was disheartened, went home and accepted the arranged marriage in her family, and married the wrong person. Xiaoyubai, on the other hand, was entangled with me for 7 years with endless regret and hatred. Suddenly, a muffled groan came from beside my leg. Xiaoyubai, who was unconscious, moved. Then he frowned and sat up, reaching out to touch the back of his head. Sizzle dash. His dazed pupils gradually focused and finally settled on my face. Xiaoyubai's body stiffened suddenly, and there was a clear tremor in the bottom of his eyes. Xiaoyu, he suddenly pounced over, his hands trembling violently, and he touched my face and my lips randomly. It was as if he was wiping something. His tone was angry, but there was a faint tremble in it. Who allowed you to vomit blood? Why didn't you tell me you were sick? Without my permission, you can't even die. Do you hear me? If you dare to die, I'll torture your mother and make her life worse than death. Each word was like a thunderclap ringing in my ear. My body stiffened suddenly, and my heart couldn't help but tremble. Xiaoyubai, you were reborn too, right? 5. Before I could finish speaking, the door had already been twisted open. The person outside was about to come in. In a hurry, I didn't care about anything else. I directly kicked Xiaoyubai off the bed, then I quickly pulled the quilt over to completely cover my naked body. The paper stars scattered all over the bed were shaken off, and many of them fell under the bed. Yubai, are you okay? When Xiqing was startled when she entered the room and saw Xiaoyubai lying on the ground, she quickly came over to help him up, but Xiaoyubai stared at her as if he were stunned. It took him a long time to shout in disbelief. Xiqing, yeah. When Xiqing nodded, a trace of blush crossing her face. I called you last night, but you didn't answer. I was afraid something had happened to you, so I came to take a look. Xiaoyubai's pupils suddenly shrank. Then he made the same reaction as me. He looked around the whole room in disbelief. Obviously, he was digesting the fact of being reborn, but my mother, who hadn't been reborn, reacted even more strongly than him. seeing that we weren't sleeping together. Her voice rose a few degrees. What's going on? Why aren't you two, Mom? I interrupted her quickly. My brother just brought me stomach medicine, but I accidentally knocked it over. Make me another cup. By the way, ask Auntie to come in and sweep up the fragments. Sigh, it's a pity, my star jar was broken along with it. As I spoke, I raised my eyes to look at Wen Xiqing, who had obviously relaxed, and smiled. Sister Xiqing came to find my brother, right? Yeah. Wen Xiqing nodded and looked at Xia Yubai shyly. Xia Yubai had completely come to his senses by now. He slowly took a deep breath, looked at her face, and said in a low and hoarse voice, Xiqing, it's been a long time since we last met. 6. Xia Yubai and Wen Xiqing went out to talk. Before leaving, he specially insisted on sweeping up the glass fragments in my room, including those handmade stars scattered all over the floor. He did it carefully, not missing a single one. When he went out carrying the garbage bag, he looked back at me and my mother deeply. His eyes were dark and obscure, but in the end, he didn't say anything and slowly closed the door. I didn't care either. I just slumped on the bed and let out a long breath as if I had survived a disaster. I was so scared. Ayo. My mother's face was pale. She sat by my bedside with a despairing expression. Don't you like Yubai? Why didn't you keep him? My eyes couldn't help but tremble slightly. A familiar dull pain emerged in my heart, but there was more relief. But he doesn't like me. You can't force this kind of thing. We can't be too insistent on repaying kindness in an improper way. It's not right to force a sale, right? But my mother covered her face with her hands and sobbed desperately. What if Yubai really marries Wen Xiqing and abandons us, mother and daughter? What about your father's company? I knew in my heart. My mother was actually afraid not only that the carefully cultivated Xia Yubai would become someone else's son-in-law, she was even more afraid of losing the company that my father had painstakingly established. After all, I didn't have a talent for business. I had been learning to play the piano since I was a child. Xia Yubai was the successor that my father had cultivated with his own hands. But if he didn't marry me, he would eventually be an outsider. What if he had ulterior motives after taking over the company and set traps for us? After all, a son-in-law was more reliable. But Mom, I sat up wrapped in the quilt and hugged my mother. Aren't you afraid that he will hate you if you scheme against my brother like this? What if he marries me, takes over our family's business, and traps us at home to take revenge? At that time, not to mention having a backer, we won't even have the capital to resist. So, the only person you can trust is me. My mother's sobbing stopped. She stared at me for a long time and finally said, Ayu, Mom will definitely find you a good husband's family. Find a good son-in-law who can take over your father's company. Me? That's not what I meant, Mom. Well, is there a possibility that there's no need to forcefully find a son-in-law, and I also have a way to solve this problem. 7. Until 10:30 at night, Xia Yubai still hadn't come back. However, Wen Xiqing updated her moments at a little after 8 o'clock. The accompanying picture was a side profile of Xia Yubai. The caption was, "You are worth my courage." I silently liked it and left a sincere comment, "Wish my brother and sister-in-law all the best." Then, not long after, the phone rang. The voice in the receiver was cold and magnetic, but concise. "Come out, I'm at your doorstep." I pursed my lips, my emotions were somewhat indescribable. And I softly hummed. I picked up my coat from the bed and put it on. Just as I was about to go out, my mother suddenly perked up. Ayu, is it Ji Wang? Yeah, I nodded, and my hand on the doorknob stopped for a few seconds. Ji Wang was the young master of the Ji family among the Xia, Wen, and Ji families, my childhood sweetheart. In the last life, he married Wen Xiqing through an arranged marriage, but he was hated and targeted by Xia Yubai and ended up in a lose-lose situation, a poor wretch. But my mother didn't notice my strangeness at all. Instead, she became excited. I think Ji Wang is quite good, we know his background well, and his family situation is suitable. Our two families are well matched. Click, the door suddenly opened from the outside and gently bumped into me. Xia Yubai then opened the door and came in. He carried the chill of early autumn on him. He was also holding 2 packs of stir-fried noodles. It was from the restaurant that my mother and I liked the most. He looked at the coat on me and said in a cold voice, "It's so late, where are you going?" 8. I paused, unconsciously tightening my fingers. In my previous life, when Xiqing and Ji Wang faded out of my world long ago, I don't know if they were happy in their marriage. I only know that after that, Xia Yubai never took a liking to Ji Wang. Every time he met him, Xia Yubai was in a very bad mood. When he got home, He would toss me around without saying a word, just going for a walk. I pursed my lips and didn't say who I was going to meet. I just silently walked around Xiaoyubai and opened the door to go out. Mom, Xiaoyubai changed his shoes and entered the house, putting the stir-fried noodles on the table with a normal expression. I brought you some late-night snacks. My mother's eyes trembled, and there was a glimmer of wetness in them. Yubai, last night, Mom was scared. Mom, Xiaoyubai smiled and interrupted her. I understand, please also believe me. I have always remembered the kindness of you adopting me. No matter who I end up marrying, I will never abandon you and Au. Let the past be the past. My mother choked and nodded repeatedly. Just as she was about to speak, she heard Xiaoyubai, while opening the disposable chopsticks, casually ask as if by accident, Au went out alone so late. I don't know if she's safe. Don't worry, my mother smiled. She's going to meet Ji Wang. With Ji Wang there, nothing will happen. Yubai. Do you think the probability of Au and Ji Wang getting together is high? I think they're quite a match. Click, the disposable chopsticks in Xiaoyubai's hand broke in half. 9. Under the dim streetlights, a silver Lotus was parked quietly on the side of the road, low-key and steady, just like the person driving the car. The window of the driver's seat was lowered halfway, revealing half of a cold and handsome side face. Seeing me come out, he tilted his head slightly towards the passenger seat indifferently. Get in the car. I pursed my lips and lowered my eyes, opened the car door and got in. My tense body relaxed inexplicably, and I let out a soft breath. Going to watch the sunrise. Ji Wang's deep and magnetic voice rang out in the car. I was stunned for a moment and shook my head. No. Ji Wang turned his head and glanced at me. Find a place to drink, have a good cry. I shook my head and sighed. No need, really. I'm not that sad. I don't deny that I'm still sad, but I'm also happy. Ji Wang looked at me in surprise, obviously not believing. You'd better be. I also knew he didn't believe me. After all, he knew how much I liked Xiaoyubai. He knew how single-mindedly I had been waiting to marry him before. Ji Wang, although this may seem a bit sudden, but I really don't like him anymore. I'm very happy that he's with Wen Xiqing. The fingers Ji Wang was holding the steering wheel was suddenly tightened. He turned his head and looked at me for a long time with dark and deep eyes. Suddenly, he said out of the blue, the star jar I gave you the day before yesterday, have you opened it? 10. I suddenly froze, looking a bit embarrassed. I did try to open it, but it shouldn't really count as opening. Ji Wang looked extremely puzzled. He unbuckled his seatbelt and leaned towards me. We were very close. So close that if someone looked from outside the car window, it would seem like we were kissing. Ji Wang stared into my eyes, and his voice was actually a bit nervous. What do you mean it doesn't count as opening? You didn't give it to someone else, did you? I let out an ah in guilt. I didn't give it away. It's just, the car door on my side was suddenly pulled open. Before I could even react, my arm was suddenly grabbed and I was yanked out of the car. The car door slammed shut. Outside the car, Xiaoyubai was wearing a black woolen coat, with a serious and cold expression. The hand that grabbed my arm used a great deal of strength. It seemed as if it was going to crush my bones. There was even a deep anger in the bottom of his eyes, as if he wanted to tear me apart. Xiaoyu, you let him kiss you. You actually agreed to let him kiss you. Did you promise him? I was stunned. He didn't kiss me. What, brother Yubai? Do you look down on me as your brother-in-law? In the car, Ji Wang sat up straight. His expression was full of provocation. Through the half-lowered car door window, he looked at Xiaoyubai faintly. His voice was still indifferent and calm, but every word was like a thorn. Brother Yubai, you're in a relationship yourself, and you still care about whether your sister is in a relationship. You care so much about Xiaoyu. Aren't you afraid your girlfriend will be jealous? Xiaoyubai's brows furrowed tightly, and his tone was unfriendly. I care about my own sister. It has nothing to do with you, huh? Ji Wang hooked his lips and smiled. Is she really just your sister? 11. Xiaoyubai's fist suddenly clenched tightly. I was startled and quickly reached out to grab his arm. Brother, let's go home. Ji Wang was fearless because he didn't know the truth, but I knew in my heart, Xiaoyubai's attitude clearly showed the resentment from his previous life when Ji Wang stole his wife. If they continued talking like this, it was definitely possible for them to start fighting. Xiaoyu, Ji Wang, however, looked deeply at the hand I was using to hold Xiaoyubai, and the bottom of his eyes was icy cold. Finally, he rarely swore. Damn it, I believed your nonsense. What a load of crap about not liking Xiaoyubai anymore. Liar. The engine roared, and the car drove away like an arrow leaving the bow. I watched the taillights disappear around the corner and couldn't help but sigh. Ji-won, you have no idea how much Xiaoyubai hates you. Sister here just saved your life, so reluctant. Xiaoyubai's cold voice sounded beside me. I glanced at him inexplicably. He didn't steal your beloved this life. Is it necessary to be so tense? 12. Xiaoyubai pursed his lips and quietly stared at me, but he didn't say anything. I couldn't help but sigh. To be honest, from waking up until now, it was only at this moment that I finally had a chance to be alone with Xiaoyubai, a chance to talk about the matter of being reborn openly. It was our fault to ruin your marriage in the previous life. We deserved everything, but my mother and I have atoned for our sins. This life, you date your white moonlight girl well. Let's owe each other nothing and start over separately. How about it? I spoke sincerely. But Xiaoyubai's eyes dimmed inexplicably. On the back of his still, tightly clenched fist, the veins bulged, as if he was suppressing some emotion. I frowned. What, wasn't 7 years in the previous life enough to relieve his anger? Was he still planning to continue taking revenge on me and my mother this life? Brother, I pursed my lips and, facing the moonlight, looked seriously and earnestly into his eyes. I wish you and your girlfriend a happy life this life. Let the past be the past. The bottom of Xiaoyubai's eyes trembled deeply. After a long silence, his tightly clenched palm lost its strength and loosened. 13. After this day, when Siqing came to my house more frequently, although I tried to avoid her, we still met several times. Especially this day, I was standing in front of the full-length mirror at the door, putting on lipstick, when Siqing, dressed in a white dress and carefully groomed, just entered the door. She looked at me with a strange expression. Ayo. Are you going to the movies with us? No, I yawned lazily, feeling inexplicable. Why would I go when you two are on a date? I made an appointment with the doctor today to go to the hospital to check my stomach. In my previous life, I finally got gastric cancer. I'm afraid the stomachaches had already started to plant the seeds of trouble from this time. Since I've been reborn, I have to cherish my life well. When Siqing seemed to relax and her face softened a lot. Oh, I see. It was Xiaoyubai, who was putting on his coat, that suddenly stopped his movements when he heard my words. He raised his eyes to look at me, his eyes deep. We'll take you there. No, necessary. I had just uttered one syllable when I opened my mouth, but when Siqing had already spoken with a look of distress. But Yubai, the hospital and the cinema are in 2 different directions. We'll be late. How about we go to the cinema another day? Ayu's health is the most important. Don't worry about her. My mother just came out of the kitchen with washed fruits. She has a date today. Ji-won will come to pick her up later. Xiaoyubai's eyebrows twitched slightly, when Siqing also looked at me in surprise, her eyes very bright. Ayu, you're dating Ji-won. Ah, I nodded a little guiltily. Yes. 14. Yes, my foot. I didn't actually make an appointment with Ji-won. The so-called date was just an excuse to fob off my mother, but I didn't expect that. When I went out, Ji-won's car was actually parked at the door. Maybe because he didn't go to work today, he wasn't wearing his neat suit and shirt. Instead, he was wearing a gray sweatshirt with broken hair falling on his forehead, looking extremely handsome. Why are you here? I got into the passenger seat, looking shocked. Ji-won raised his eyebrows and threw me a bag of steamed buns, his tone faint. My mother specifically woke me up this morning and told me not to be late for the date with you. Well. It seemed that my mother and Ji-won's mother had already discussed this in advance. Your mother wants to make us, Ji-won said calmly, making a statement. I reached out and covered my face, not responding. Ji-won was a lawyer. He could definitely see through my family's situation at a glance. My father held 52% of the company's shares. After his death, my mother got 27%, I got 15%, and Xiaoyubai got 10%, but I'm an idiot in finance, and my mother is a pedantic and dependent person. We simply can't take over the company. Xiaoyubai can, but he only has 10% of the equity, and no one will accept him as the leader, unless my mother or I give him our shares. Only then can he become the legitimate largest shareholder. Now that he's with Wen Siqing, he's bound to be an outsider. Your mother won't take the risk of giving him her shares to support him as the leader anymore. So, the only way out is to find you a reliable son-in-law. Ji-won's analysis was completely correct. I was speechless and sighed. Don't worry, I have my own way. We don't need to. Okay. These 2 words suddenly made me stunned. After blinking my eyes twice, I didn't even react. Ah, what? 15. Until I came back from the hospital after the examination, I didn't exchange even a single word with Ji Wang. He also didn't speak, allowing the silence to spread in the car. Until the car stopped in front of my house and I opened the car door and got out, he suddenly called out to me. Also opened the door and got out, and stood in front of me. Xiaoyu. Ji Wang's gaze was fixed on my face, and his deep pupils reflected my reflection. I'm serious, I nodded hastily, with an evasive feeling in my heart. I know. But Ji Wang suddenly seemed to see through my intentions, and his tone was gloomy. Give me an answer before 8 o'clock tomorrow night, 1 minute late, and I'll sue you. Tisk, I kicked him. Are you courting death? Ji Wang laughed heartily and reached out to rub the top of my head. So, I advise you not to stand up a lawyer easily, your days will be very convict-worthy. I simply put my 2 wrists together and pushed them in front of him. I said unhappily, come on, call the police, arrest me, come on. My wrists were grabbed and yanked suddenly, and my face hit a solid and warm chest. Ji Wang hugged me in his arms and held me tightly. Caught me, silence like a chicken. Wah, what's going on? Bang, something fell to the ground at the corner of the intersection. I turned my head to look and saw Xiaoyu and Wen Xiqing standing at the intersection, holding hands. A paper bag was knocked over at Wen Xiqing's feet. The beer cans inside were still rolling on the ground, but my gaze stopped on the half-fallen box of conspicuous blue and white umbrella boxes in the paper bag. Oh, 16, sorry. Wen Xiqing smiled at us with a gossipy look on her face, her eyes bright. She covered her mouth shyly. I'm really shocked. I even forgot I was still carrying the bag. You two, hee, are making progress so fast, aren't you? Xiaoyu, however, frowned, and his eyes swept over the arm Ji Wang was using to hold me. His tone was cold, still being affectionate at the doorstep. Haven't you hugged enough? Wen Xiqing's expression froze slightly. Ji Wang, however, raised his eyebrows. Nope, not enough. Nope, my ass. I quickly stepped back from Ji Wang's arms and touched my blushing face. Xiaoyu's eyes became even darker. He came over and pulled me away from Ji Wang. What was the result of the examination? It's okay. I shook my head. Just pay attention to my diet in the future and have regular check-ups. And there won't be any problems. Xiaoyu's expression softened slightly, and he nodded. Wen Xiqing stepped forward with a smile and took his arm. Yubai, let's go in first. Don't disturb Au and Ji Wang's date. Xiaoyu didn't move. His eyes swept over me and Ji Wang. Late at night, and you still haven't finished talking. Ji Wang frowned, but still had a smile on his face. Brother Yubai, you're meddling a bit too much, aren't you? You've already brought Sister Xiqing home. And you're still meddling in our affairs. My heart trembled. I was afraid that Ji Wang would say something excessive. I quickly tugged on him. I'm going home. Bye, be careful on the way. After saying that, without waiting for their reaction, I turned around and ran into the gate. I ran all the way back to my room. I didn't dare to turn on the light and secretly peeked through the curtains at the downstairs. Ji Wang's car had already driven away and was turning the corner. I let out a sigh of relief. Just as I was about to put down the curtains, I accidentally glanced, but I found that Wen Xiqing and Xiaoyu seemed to be arguing. 2 seconds later, I put down the curtains. I could probably guess that it was related to me. After all, Wen Xiqing had known since she was a child that Xiaoyu was my childhood betrothed husband. Now even though the two of them had established a relationship, she must still be bothered by my existence. I could understand. I took out my phone from my bag. After thinking about it, I still sent a message to Ji Wang. Lawyer Ji, don't forget the matter I entrusted you with today. It's very important. Please do it as soon as possible. I was really in a hurry to completely draw a line with Xiaoyu. Although I've decided to let the past go, but being reborn once, maybe Xiaoyu can act as if nothing ever happened. I can't forget the entanglement of those 7 years. Nor can I pretend that it never happened. Moreover, even if there was no such thing as being reborn, according to the current situation, it's no longer suitable for us to stay under the same roof and act like a family. 17. I was suddenly awakened by the ringtone of my mobile phone. The moonlight was faint. I opened my eyes and looked at the time on the screen. It was 2:37 in the morning. The caller turned out to be Xiaoyu. What are you doing in the middle of the night? I shrank deeper into the quilt, and my consciousness became a bit clearer. Something's not right. Wasn't Xiaoyu supposed to be having an intimate time with Wen Xiqing in bed at this moment? Why is he calling me? And just as I thought this, a coquettish cry from Wen Xiqing immediately came from the receiver. Yubai, I can't take it anymore." Along with her voice, there was also Xiaoyubai's low and hoarse gasping. My mind jolted. I suddenly opened my eyes wide. And this time I was completely awake. With an indescribable expression, I hung up the phone with a snap. "Are you crazy?" But what I didn't hear was that at the moment I hung up the phone, that low and hoarse AU came from the receiver. 18. When Ji-won came to my house with the documents, I had been cooped up in the piano room for 4 hours, practicing. In my previous life, although Xiaoyubai imprisoned my freedom, at least he left me with a piano. Those long, painful, and lonely times were all accompanied by the piano. Otherwise, I might have gone crazy long ago. "Why do I feel like you've improved a lot overnight?" After a piece of music ended, Ji-won pushed the door open and came in. There was a thick look of surprise in his eyes. "I think you're almost certain to win this competition." I smiled silently. In my previous life, because I was preparing for my marriage, I missed this piano competition. This life, I won't miss it again. My gaze fell on the documents in Ji-won's hand, and I raised my eyebrows. Ji-won pursed his lips, handed the documents to me, and his expression was somewhat strange. "As you requested, it's all done." I opened the documents, took a general look through them, and then looked up at him with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Lawyer Ji, for your great help. Have you thought it through?" Ji-won stared at me and asked. I nodded. "Yeah, this is the best plan to deal with our relationship." Ji-won paused. "Actually, you don't have to be in such a hurry. After all, Xiaoyubai and Wen Xiqing have just gotten together." Ji-won didn't say the second half of the sentence, but I knew what he meant. He meant that whether the two of them would eventually make it or not was still up for discussion. It doesn't matter, even if it's not Wen Xiqing, but someone else. We still need to avoid suspicion. And the phone call from last night flashed in my mind. I covered my face. "Wen Xiqing is in a hurry." Tisk, a look of disgust appeared between Ji-won's eyebrows. "Stay away from her." I widened my eyes slightly in surprise. Did Ji-won dislike Wen Xiqing so much? Then why did he get married to her through an arranged marriage in the previous life? 19. As Ji-won spoke, he sneered again. "She clearly knew that your family adopted Xiaoyubai as a future son-in-law in advance, but she still pretended to be innocent and came to snatch him. What's the difference between her and a mistress?" What kind of words were these? Wasn't he the same? My playful eyes swept up and down Ji-won. He obviously realized it too, and reached out to touch his nose. He coughed lightly and said unhappily, "Am I the same as her? Is having a crush the same as snatching someone openly? Before I was sure that there was no chance between you and Xiaoyubai. Whoever noticed that I liked you? What about her?" She was afraid that others wouldn't notice the ambiguity between her and Xiaoyubai. "I even confessed secretly by giving you something. You didn't even see it." Ji-won said the last sentence very quietly. I really didn't hear it clearly, but when I asked him again, he refused to say anything more. Ji-won didn't stay long. He left after putting down the documents. I saw him to the door, but he suddenly stopped, bent down, lowered his eyes, and leaned slightly towards me, with a smile on his lips. He said, "Just a friendly reminder, there are only 5 hours left until 8 o'clock tonight." I slammed the door shut. "Just go already." I rubbed my slightly cold arms, shook my head, and turned around with a smile. Just as I was about to enter the house, I looked up and found that on the terrace on the second floor, Xiaoyubai was sitting on a rattan chair, looking at me with a faint gaze. I didn't know how long he had been watching. 20. "Here, this is for you." I pulled open the rattan chair and sat down, placing the documents that Ji-won had brought on the round table. Xiaoyubai frowned but didn't pick up the documents. Instead, he took the coat placed beside him and handed it to me. "Put it on." I was taken aback for a moment and waved my hand. "No need, you can read the documents first." After he read and signed them, I could just go back to my room directly. It would only take a few minutes. "Put it on," Xiaoyubai repeated. It was as if I didn't put it on, there would be no way to talk. Helpless, I had to put on his coat. "Are you really together?" Xiaoyubai suddenly asked. I pursed my lips and evaded this question. I pushed the documents towards him. "Take a look, just sign it if there's no problem." Xiaoyubai showed a gloomy expression, opened the documents, and took a rough look. Unexpectedly, his brows furrowed tighter and tighter. "What? Are the conditions not suitable?" I looked at him in confusion. I thought the conditions I offered were already very generous. I entrusted all the 15% of the shares under my name to Xiaoyubai, so he would have 25% of the shares, except for my mother's 27%. He would already have the highest personal dry shares among the company's shareholders. I still had some self-awareness. Rather than overestimating my abilities and trying to take over the company on my own, it would be better for me to give all the shares to Xiaoyubai, and directly support him to take the position of general manager. My mother and I wouldn't have to do anything and could just lie back and receive the money. Wouldn't that be great? However, I didn't give him these shares for nothing. I've entrusted my entire fortune to you. It's not too much for me to ask for some guarantees, right? I had 3 conditions. First, he could never dissolve the adoption relationship with my family. He would always be my brother and always keep the surname Xia. Second, I didn't care about the profit and loss of his management of the company. The annual dividend income for my mother and me must be 50 million yuan. My mother was just afraid that Xiaoyubai wasn't one of our own and was worried about being cheated, so why not make it simple? Whether he cheats us or not, whether he schemes or not, we just want the fixed 50 million yuan. If the profit is less, Xiaoyubai will have to pay us out of his own pocket. If the profit is more, he can keep it for himself. After all, we can't let him manage the company without any return. If we want to be hands-off bosses, we have to pay some price. Third, Xiaoyubai must move out of my house, unless it's for matters like life and death, funerals, natural disasters, or man-made disasters. We don't have to see each other for the rest of our lives. Don't have to see each other. There was a hint of coldness on Xiaoyubai's lips. Xiaoyu, why should I let you off so easily? 21. What kind of words were these? I was so angry that I laughed. You're only going to gain and not lose. Okay, what do you mean by letting me off easily? I don't believe you can still face my mother and me like before. Not seeing each other anymore is good for everyone. Good. Xiaoyubai suddenly threw the documents to the ground, and anger burned in the bottom of his eyes. I've never been okay. Xiaoyu, if you want me to sign the contract, fine. I have only one request. You can't be with Ji Wang. His fist was clenched tightly, and the bulging veins on the back of his hand showed how angry Xiaoyubai was, but I felt completely powerless. I raised my eyes and looked into the distance, putting my cold fingertips into my pocket. What does this have to do with Ji Wang? Xiaoyubai, you still can't let go of the hatred from the previous life. What has happened has already happened. For the things we can't get over, my voice stopped abruptly. I was stunned for a few seconds, and then I took out my hand from my pocket. My finger accidentally brought out the object with a sharp corner that I had just touched. A yellow paper star. It should have accidentally fallen into Xiaoyubai's pocket when the jar was broken that night, the only surviving star. My eyes trembled, and I slowly unfolded it layer by layer, but a slender and fair hand suddenly snatched it away. Xiaoyubai's face turned livid, and he tore it to pieces. My pupils shrank slightly. I looked up at Xiaoyubai and said slowly, so, you already knew what was in the star jar that Ji Wang gave me. 22. Almost in an instant, the images of the day I was reborn flashed through my mind like an electric shock. The white moonlight that he had lost and regained was right in front of him, at the crucial moment when the words he had regretted for a lifetime could be said at once. For some reason, Xiaoyubai insisted on sweeping up all the paper stars in my room first. At this moment, I suddenly seemed to have the answer. I suddenly stood up from the chair, shook my head, and took several steps back. So, Xiaoyubai's hostility towards Ji Wang, it might not just be because he married Wen Xiqing in the previous life. Yes, since Ji Wang disliked Wen Xiqing so much, why did he agree to the arranged marriage with her? Could it be that in the previous life? I couldn't help but take a deep breath in surprise. The reason why Ji Wang and you ended up in a lose-lose situation was it for me? Every time Xiaoyubai met Ji Wang, he would come back and torture me. It wasn't because of Wen Xiqing. Yes. Xiaoyubai suddenly stepped forward and grabbed my arm. The bottom of his eyes was red, and he gritted his teeth and said, every time he came to me, he was bargaining with me to let you go. But I didn't want to. I didn't want to let you go even if I died. The strength on my arm suddenly loosened. Xiaoyubai pulled me into his arms, and as if admitting defeat, he pressed his forehead against my shoulder. I thought that I didn't want to let you go because I hated you, but the moment you vomited blood in front of me, I was really scared. At that moment, I felt that as long as you could live, all the hatred didn't matter anymore. After being reborn, I also thought that everything was in the past, and we could all start over. But Xiaoyu, even when I'm with Xiqing, all I can think about is you. I'm afraid that you'll really be with Ji Wang, that you'll accept him and fall in love with him. Xiaoyu, I might really love. Shut up. I suddenly slapped him across the face. I stopped the words that hadn't come out of his mouth. My palm was shaking violently, and I kept shaking my head and backing away. Xiaobai, you can't. No matter what you want to say, you can't say it. He couldn't have been full of thoughts about Wen Xiqing when he was with me in the previous life, and now that he has Wen Xiqing in this life, he starts to miss me again. Xiaobai, in this life, I can only be your sister, there won't be anything else. 23. I don't know what Xiaobai said to Wen Xiqing that night. I only know that when she came to my house the next morning, her eyes were red. The two of them seemed to have a big fight in the room. The sound was very loud. And there were sounds of crying. Even I in the piano room could vaguely hear it. My fingers tapped smoothly on the piano keys, and the sound of the piano covered up all the noise that had nothing to do with me. My heart gradually calmed down, but I didn't expect that Wen Xiqing would suddenly push the door open and come in. She didn't seem to have been doing well recently. Her delicate makeup couldn't hide her fatigue, her eyes were red, she must have just cried. My fingers paused slightly, and I looked at her in confusion. Sister-in-law, is there something wrong? Wen Xiqing forced a smile, her gaze swept over my piano, and she asked casually, Ayu, I heard that the winner of this piano competition has a chance to study at Berklee College of Music for 3 years. I pursed my lips. Yeah, that's right. You'll win, right? Wen Xiqing lowered her eyes to look at me, and there was a trace of tension that could break at a touch in the bottom of her eyes. My fingers completely left the piano keys. I looked up at her seriously and smiled. I didn't intend to beat around the bush. Sister-in-law, you can rest assured, whether I win or not, my mother and I will draw a clear line with Xiaobai, so, stop having those useless thoughts, it's really disgusting. I thought I had spoken quite mildly. But Wen Xiqing's eyes turned red for no apparent reason, and she smiled. Then what can I do? I finally snatched him away from you, but I found that there are traces of you everywhere in his heart. My fingers shrank slightly, and for a moment, I seemed to see myself in the previous life, but Wen Xiqing was a bit better than me. I had no choice, but she did. Then, is it still necessary to persevere? Wen Xiqing smiled sadly. It's necessary, as long as you disappear from his world. I'm confident that I can be with him until the end. The words lingered on my lips. In the end, I swallowed them back. In this life, the most inappropriate thing a person can do is to try to persuade and change others' values. Respect. I smiled at Wen Xiqing sincerely, and best wishes. 24. On the day of my piano competition, Ji Wang came, Xiaobai also came, both of them were holding flowers in their arms. I paused for a moment, then stepped forward and took the bright red roses from Ji Wang. Xiaobai looked down at the warm and bright sunflowers in his arms, gave a bitter smile, and then turned around and threw the flowers into the trash can. The slight sound made everyone backstage slightly stunned, but Xiaobai seemed not to notice at all. He smiled at me. Xiaoyu, can we talk? I looked at him quietly for 3 seconds, then nodded. Okay. Ji Wang raised his eyebrows and whispered in my ear. You still haven't given me an answer, so why are you talking to him first? I clicked my tongue softly and gave him a little kick. What are you competing with him for? I would see Xiaobai less and less, and I might not see him again in the future. He still had a long time ahead of him. Why did he have to compete for this? Ji Wang obviously realized it too. He pursed his lips and said in a low voice, then you must give me an answer after the competition, otherwise, I'll really sue you. Me. In the quiet and empty stairwell, Xiaobai had his back to me, and his fist was clenched tightly. I shrank my shoulders. I felt a bit cold. Xiaoyu, if I hadn't seen the competition flyer today and hadn't seen the prize that the winner would go abroad for further study, when were you going to tell me that you were leaving? Would it be that one day when I came home, I suddenly found that you and Mom had both disappeared, then I would search everywhere and find that you had already left me behind and gone? 25. Xiaobai's voice was hoarse. It echoed faintly in the empty stairwell. I lowered my eyes and pursed my lips. I planned to notify you after winning the competition. It was to notify, not to tell, because regardless of whether I won the competition or not, and whether Xiaobai signed that entrustment agreement or not, my mother and I were going to leave. A new house had already been bought. I had also planned a new life, and from beginning to end in the plan, there was no Xiaobai. There were plenty of people eager to get the shares he didn't want. He wasn't the only one who could manage the company. Brother, I sighed. Sign the agreement. Consider it as my last compensation to you. After all, it was my mother who was at fault first in the previous life. Strictly speaking, Xiaobai was also a victim. There was really no need to take revenge on him. Parting amicably was also worthy of the fate of being family in this life. Xiaoyubai's voice trembled. Do you really want to abandon me, brother? We've long been on different paths, so how could it be called abandonment? What if I love you? What if I've already broken up with Xiqing? Xiaoyubai finally turned around, his eyes already red. Slap. I expressionlessly slapped him a resounding slap. This is the answer. Every time you say it, I'll hit you, until you stop saying such crazy things. Xiaoyubai turned his face away, and tears silently slid down from the corners of his eyes. Even his breathing became tremulous. Xiaoyu, what's my fault? I just repented a little late. Your Xia family manipulated my destiny. Shouldn't I hate it? But in this life, I've woken up. I've discovered who I really love. Slap. The backhand slap landed on Xiaoyubai's face. I was expressionless, saying all that is useless. You have only two choices now, either continue to say these crazy things, and then keep those 10% of the shares and step down from the position of general manager to that of a shareholder. I'll hire someone else as the general manager before I go abroad, or sign the agreement, steadily be your general manager and earn countless amounts of money. Choose one. 26. When I came out of the stairwell, the wind in the corridor blew across my cheeks, bringing a sense of coolness. I reached out and touched my face, only to find my hand wet. Was I actually crying with joy, or feeling relieved after surviving a disaster? I didn't know, but in any case, it wasn't because of sadness. There was a person leaning against the wall not far away, dressed in a suit and looking handsome, but he was anxiously knocking the back of his head gently against the wall. I didn't know how long he had been waiting. Ji Wang. I called him softly. Ji Wang straightened up suddenly and subconsciously looked behind me. After confirming that Xiaoyubai hadn't followed, he finally let out a sigh of relief. After talking to him, it's my turn, right? I took out my phone and looked at the time. I'm afraid it's too late. I'm about to go on stage. After saying that, I smiled slyly. I took out a paper star from my pocket and stuffed it into his hand. Read it after I go on stage. 27. The spotlight shone on my face. I lifted the hem of my skirt and sat down. My fingers landed on the piano keys, but I didn't start playing immediately. I turned my head and scanned the audience below. Ji Wang was sitting in the first row, seriously unfolding that paper star. It was the one I had rummaged through everything and finally found in the crack of the bedside. Inside was Ji Wang's confession to me. If you and Xiaoyubai don't make it, look back at me. I've been waiting for you for so many years. From the day Xiaoyubai married me and completely took over the company left by my father. There was a new line of words added below. It wasn't really a response, just an address. The address of the new house I bought in the United States. Boom, my fingers landed on the keys, and I smiled and pressed the first note. 28. Afterward, much later, I married Ji Wang and settled down back in the country. Ding dong, my phone sent a text message notification. Ji Wang, who was coaxing our daughter, pursed his lips and looked awkward. Honey, your alimony of 50 million has arrived. You're so jealous. I poked his forehead with my finger. This is called welfare dividend, not alimony. I swiped up on my phone and opened the text message. The transferred amount was far more than 50 million, below the transfer record. As always, there was a note attached. Xiaoyu, meet me, please. My expression unchanged. I deleted the text message with a flick of my finger. I turned around and clapped my hands at my daughter. Come on, baby, let mom hold you. My body fell into a warm embrace. Ji Wang hugged me tightly and kissed my lips gently. Put the baby aside for now. I want to hold my wife first. If you don't let me, I'll sue you for domestic violence. Tisk. I raised the corners of my lips and smiled. Then call the police. Story 2. I was reborn. Back to the year when I deeply loathed my sworn enemy. In this year, he caught me skipping classes, violating school rules, and getting into fights. I hated him for being meddlesome, unfeeling, and heartless. But after being reborn at the age of 28, I discovered something. Under the wax seal of the love letter that I personally reported, was actually printed with my name, and the alpha pheromones that I released to disgust him, could actually make my sworn enemy's eyes turn red at the corners, his legs tremble, and him bite his lips tightly like an omega in heat. 1. At first, I hated Shin Jiqing because he was the son of the dean whom I disliked the most. That uncompromising old man had raised another unfeeling young one. Every day, he would team up with his father to block me at the classroom door. Chu Rao, you're 10 minutes late. 2 points will be deducted from the discipline score. The number of students absent from the morning reading in class 6 exceeds 5%. so 3 points will be deducted from the class score. The familiar nightmare-like voice echoed in my ears like a mantra. When I opened my eyes, I suddenly met a face as cold as frost. He lifted his eyelids and looked at me indifferently, saying, "What are you staring blankly for? Why don't you go in?" It was 7:30 in the morning. The sunlight penetrated the corridor of the teaching building and shone precisely on Shin Jiqing. He was a fair and handsome alpha young master, a recognized top student, school heartthrob, student council president, and outstanding student in No. 7 middle school. All the noble and wonderful words could be used to describe this person, and I was the feared bully in the school, a low-class alpha whose father was a murderer. I squeezed the fist hidden under the sleeve of my school uniform. It hurt quite a bit, so I couldn't help but grin ferociously and forced him step by step into a secluded place. Shin Jiqing. I never expected to see him again in this life. A person who had been dead for 10 years. A sworn enemy who had looked down upon and despised me throughout his life, a coward who was supposed to fight with me for a lifetime but left the sea of bitterness ahead of time without permission. I stared at those thin lips that kept talking non-stop, and an itch welled up in my heart, filled with evil thoughts. "Chu Rao, are you looking at me like this because you want to fight?" Shin Jiqing neatly put away his disciplinary committee badge, pursed his lips, and raised his chin against the light. "You've been late 3 times and participated in 5 fights this month. I advise you." I didn't want to listen to Shin Jiqing, so I blocked the words that followed with my own mouth. It was a greeting gift from the 28-year-old President Chu, too. I held those thin lips that couldn't utter nice words, and also released a lot of alpha pheromones to disgust him, but unexpectedly, they were very soft and even a bit sweet. Not as hard and astringent as I had imagined. It turned out that the answer I had believed in for 2 lifetimes was wrong. Under Shin Jiqing's astonished gaze, I continued to press forward, avoided the surveillance cameras, held the back of his head, and pried open his teeth, advancing aggressively like a conqueror. The annoying Shin Jiqing finally fell silent, probably due to the great shock. He even forgot to resist and let me kiss him until his eyes were blurred and he was almost suffocated in the corridor filled with the sound of reading. So, the young master's mouth is so soft. After the kiss ended, I wickedly licked my lips to savor it, and actually didn't feel the slightest nausea towards an alpha of the same kind. On the contrary, the air was filled with the bitter fragrance of violets, and I even detected a hint of sweetness, pheromones. Shin Jiqing leaned against the wall behind him, covered his mouth with his hand and gasped for breath. His eyes were as red as a rabbit's. When he came to his senses, there was a loud slap followed by a furious roar. "Chu Rao, are you crazy?" "I am crazy. I have all sorts of dirty diseases, mental illness, rabies. I even picked up garbage to eat this morning." I was slapped and became inexplicably excited. I rubbed his swollen lips from being kissed, forcing him to shrink into the corner with his pupils trembling. "Outstanding student, I won't let you bully me anymore. If you dare to provoke me again, even if you're an alpha, I'll kill you." 3. That morning, Shin Jiqing walked back to the classroom while leaning on the wall. His tall and thin figure still tried to stand upright, and his back was as inflexible as himself, pretending to be aloof. We were clearly in the same class, yet he always caught me to deduct the class score. Wasn't he just trying to isolate me from the whole class? Ridiculous. But Shin Jiqing didn't know that I was reborn. I was reborn from a capitalist who had competed in the business world and climbed to the peak of power. The 28-year-old Chu Rao was no longer a bottom-level alpha. I was a proper president of a listed company, even richer than Shin Jiqing's business-running mother. I stared at the straight back of Shin Jiqing in the front row and couldn't help but daydream. If he had still been alive in the previous life, I would definitely have humiliated him with money and let him see how glorious the alpha he had looked down upon back then had become. "Teacher, I need to go to the restroom." In the middle of the morning reading class, Shin Jiqing in the front row suddenly put down his book, stuffed something, and rushed out of the door in a hurry. I pretended not to care and continued to read the clumsy English text, but my mind couldn't help thinking about it. Just now, when Shin Jiqing passed by me, his unsteady steps, and under the loose school uniform, his slightly trembling body, could a single kiss also trigger the susceptible period? "Teacher, I also need to go to the restroom." After reporting, Teacher Wang on the podium threw a piece of chalk at my head. As always, he was a snobbish person with double standards. I whistled like a hooligan and didn't care. I followed the remaining scent of Shin Jiqing and went out to look for him. It was very strange. How could an alpha smell so good? 4. I kicked open each toilet cubicle one by one, but there was no scolding from Shinjiqing. He wasn't on the 3rd floor, not on the 4th floor, nor on the 1st and 2nd floors. I ran to the rooftop, gently pushing open the half-closed iron door. A gust of chilly spring breeze indeed carried the familiar fragrance and floated towards me from the fence. However, there was an extremely inferior chemical reagent smell mixed in, which didn't belong to him. Shinjiqing. What the hell are you doing? I rushed towards him and snatched the syringe. It was already empty. I didn't know what he had injected into his gland, but his expression quickly returned to normal, cold and frosty. His pale thin lips spat out a word, scram. I was so angry that I laughed. I pinched his cheek and got closer, saying, "Why is the young master's mouth still so tough? Haven't you been kissed enough, Chu Rao?" Shinjiqing suddenly raised his eyes, but could only feebly pat my hand away and glared at me fiercely. "You said that we would stay out of each other's business from now on. Don't disgust each other anymore. I told you not to provoke me, but I didn't say I couldn't provoke you." I put away my smile and held the empty syringe in front of his eyes. "What exactly is this?" "A thing that could make an alpha calm down quickly but would cause a sudden drop in body temperature and make the body weak. It couldn't be an inhibitor. And it definitely had side effects. Even if I die, it has nothing to do with you, right?" Shinjiqing snatched the syringe and walked out, then stopped, turned around, and forced out a sarcastic smile. "No, if I die, Chu Rao, you should be very happy." My heart suddenly felt a dull pain. I couldn't help but think of that afternoon 3 years ago when I learned of his death. It was also as sunny and beautiful as today. An old acquaintance casually said, "Why didn't Shinjiqing come?" "Because on the second night after our college entrance examination, he committed suicide by jumping off a building." The death scene was, it was said that before jumping, he also cut his wrists, and his gland was stabbed to a pulp, out of shape. At that moment, the glass in my hand was crushed with a snap, and the blood was glaringly red. I clearly wasn't happy. 5. In the previous life, I didn't take the college entrance examination, because Shinjiqing performed abnormally in a competition. And the school finally gave me the only recommendation quota. I was an underachiever who regarded learning as a joke and discipline violations as a daily routine. Many people in class 6 were indignant and made sarcastic remarks about me. So, I left the school in Nanjing in a hurry in April of that year and cut off contact with everyone in Nanjing until I achieved success in my career. It was precisely because of this that 7 years after Shinjiqing's death, I learned the truth at a class reunion. Those who knew the situation said that Shinjiqing's death was very hasty. There was no funeral, no tombstone, and his ashes were scattered into the sea by his mother. Later, I went to that sea many times. I was not reconciled. What had supported me to climb to the peak of power in those years was the contemptuous look in Shinjiqing's eyes. If he died, what was the point of all my success, winning, and the pride of looking down on other alphas? There was no sense of accomplishment at all. So, Shinjiqing couldn't die before me. In this life, he was destined to be entangled with me and have no peace. 6. Later, when I returned to the classroom, Shinjiqing ignored me for a whole day, until the next day. During the English class, the head teacher, Teacher Wang, randomly selected someone to recite the text. Because I had been to the restroom for 3 classes yesterday, he vengefully selected me. I could remember the content at a glance. And I could also read the foreign language, but with my unchangeable dialect accent, it immediately attracted laughter from the whole class. "Is Chu Rao really from the countryside? His English has a rural dialect flavor. Don't be so funny, laugh, laugh. His father is a murderer. Be careful, he gets angry and kills you too." Teacher Wang coughed twice and couldn't hold back his laughter either. He turned around and called Shinjiqing, who had a fluent English accent, to stand up and recite. But he, who usually opposed me everywhere, was surprisingly rebellious today. First, he deliberately recited 2 sentences with a clumsy accent, and then, amidst the ridicule of the classmates, he put down his book, raised his eyes with the lower part of the white visible, and looked directly at Teacher Wang. "Sorry, I can't remember clearly." Teacher Wang's face looked a bit ugly, but when Shinjiqing was being laughed at, he immediately slapped the table to stop it. "What are you all laughing at? Do you think your accents are very standard? It's like the pot calling the kettle black." The classmates pouted and shut up. They secretly cursed this society that values family background. Only I was in a daze for a whole class, staring at Shinjiqing's thin back. I tried hard to recall the previous life. Why couldn't I remember that the young master had ever spoken up for me? 7. That night after school. My old and worn-out mobile phone received a bank card deposit text message. It was the sponsorship money sent by the sponsor on time in mid-March. This sponsor, who had never shown up, had been sponsoring me since I was admitted to the key high school in the city, and had been sending money for 3 years. Later, when I became successful and wanted to repay him handsomely, I couldn't find this person no matter how hard I tried. He seemed to have evaporated from the world, leaving no clues. There wasn't even a signature. Now that I was reborn, I not only had to prevent Shin Jiqing from committing suicide but also had to find the sponsor to thank him in person and repay him. The next day, during the weekend monthly leave, I took all the money I had on hand and went to the securities company in the city to buy several stocks. The intraday trading had a profit on the same day, and the money I invested quickly multiplied several times. I made a lot of money. I took this money and found a hacker to help me investigate the sponsor. The hacker roughly found the IP address of the other party's mobile phone, but other information was well hidden and nothing was known. I had to rush to the location on the map to look for it, in the old urban area on the outskirts of the east of Nanjing. The place where Shin Jiqing often came to do volunteer service. I was hesitating whether to ask him for clues when, unexpectedly, I turned around and bumped into a group of old acquaintances. Yo, the son of the school bully whose father is a murderer. 8. That group of hooligans started fighting with me without saying a word. The fruits I bought to express my gratitude rolled all over the ground and rolled out of the end of the dark alley along the slope, while we were fighting. It rained heavily without warning, washing away the large patches of blood on the bluestone slabs. I spat out a mouthful of blood and wanted to stop, but the yellow-haired guy lying on the ground cursed again. Damn it, a disgrace among alphas, a meddlesome toad. I'll skin and cramp that little swan in your class sooner or later. I'll fuck him. My fist uncontrollably hit his face. I could no longer control the surging anger in my body. I released the violent nature of an alpha and crazily punched, not stopping even when they begged for mercy. Reason told me not to fight anymore, but my emotions were at work. The dirty words in their mouths kept ringing in my mind, and I was suspicious whether his death was related to them, and whether they had really defiled him in the previous life. My rationality was completely broken, until a wisp of fragrance suddenly broke into the air mixed with dirty pheromones and bloodstains. And someone pulled me hard from behind. Chu Rao, are you crazy? 9. I thought I should look quite embarrassed now, soaked by the rain, and beating people like a madman, with red eyes, but when I turned around, those peach blossom eyes didn't have fear, disgust, or ridicule, only disappointment. For some reason, such disappointed dark eyes, like needles, deeply hurts my heart. Shin Jiqing threw away the umbrella, called 120, roughly dealt with the evidence at the scene, and quickly pulled me out of the dark alley. We were silent all the way, until he bought the inhibitor and medicine, and then coldly gave me disinfection and bandaged me. His rough movements made me couldn't help but hiss. Shin Jiqing then lifted his long, wet eyelashes and snorted, "Why didn't it hurt you to death, big school bully?" I suddenly felt a bit wronged, but he saved me tonight, bought the medicine, and also helped me out before. What if he was being sarcastic? I endured it. I wanted to light a cigarette to relieve boredom, but Shin Jiqing's hand applying the medicine suddenly shook and quickly retracted. I was puzzled, but immediately extinguished the cigarette butt and patiently apologized. "Sorry, I was out of my mind tonight, I didn't mean it. I don't have a violent tendency either." Shin Jiqing stood up and took a breath, but didn't let it go. Later, he viciously scolded me for being incorrigible and a reckless person who didn't care about his life. I also bowed my head and admitted it, but unexpectedly, at the flag-raising ceremony on Monday, after Shin Jiqing finished his speech as a student representative, his father, that middle-aged old man, straightened his administrative jacket and came to the stage to severely criticize me in front of the whole school. The content was an exaggerated description of my group fight on the weekend. The last sentence was "like father, like son," and the speech he read was handed to him by Shin Jiqing himself. 10. A 5,000-word self-criticism, a demerit record, and a public criticism. All of these were nothing, but the problem was that the speech was written by Shin Jiqing, a person who had bandaged my wounds the day before yesterday, with a sharp tongue but a soft heart, and persuaded me to turn over a new leaf. Yesterday, he actually wrote such a speech for his hypocritical father. Anger welled up, as soon as the flag-raising ceremony ended. I rushed to the front of the podium, dragged Shin Jiqing to a corner, and questioned him. Why did you stab me in the back, Shinjiqing? You clearly don't think that way, you are clearly different from others, you clearly hate that sentence the most. I couldn't help but choke. Clearly, he also believed that like father, not always like son. What is this considered as stabbing in the back? Shinjiqing impatiently stepped back, and his slightly raised eyes were like looking at garbage. Exuding bone-chilling coldness, with our relationship, this is at most just revenge. You, Chu Rao, have violated discipline repeatedly. In my eyes, you are just a— The following words were blocked by me viciously. I knew this person's mouth was as venomous as if smeared with poison. Only by kissing him could I feel his softness. No longer being deceived by his cold-hearted exterior, he struggled like crazy, but I held him down and kissed him desperately. Our pheromones leaked out and intertwined. Losing all my rationality, I blurted out, Shinjiqing, why do you smell so good? I really want to fuck you. When I came to my senses, Shinjiqing covered his mouth with his backhand, and the corners of his eyes turned red with anger. Chu Rao, you beast. 11, I'm a beast. What about you? I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth. Shinjiqing, do you know why I beat those people? Shinjiqing regained his composure and looked up coldly. Does it matter? Looking at this cold-hearted face, I finally gave up and let out a soft scoff. Shinjiqing, you have no heart, just because of blood ties. You, who consider yourself noble, have to help the dean who distributes all the poverty alleviation funds to the children of the rich, write such a humiliating speech for him, and mock me in front of the whole school, firmly believing that I'm destined to be a piece of trash in this life, right? Shinjiqing turned his face away and pursed his lips. There was no refutation, no explanation, no question. In those eyes that I could never see through, there was actually a flash of grief. I wanted to hold him back as he turned to leave, but I pulled too hard. I tore off his school uniform jacket in one go. A fair and white arm was exposed in front of my eyes, and I was completely stunned. Shinjiqing's left arm was full of wounds, cuts, burns, whip marks. There were densely packed scars all over it. How could this happen? Chu Rao, if you do it again, I'll never let you go. Shinjiqing, whose wounds were exposed, panicked. He hastily gathered his clothes and ran towards the teaching building, almost staggering and falling. I froze in place for a long time. I remembered that no matter how hot the summer was, Shinjiqing never took off his jacket and never showed his arms. Suddenly, a sense of suffocation surged and filled my heart. 12. Before class that day, I was caught by Teacher Wang, who was passing by, and taken to the dean's office, in front of Shinjiqing's father. The moment he saw me, frowned and muttered why there was a violet smell on a piece of trash like me, but he quickly denied his absurd suspicion, swallowed the question on the tip of his tongue, and scolded me mercilessly. Now he would never know. 30 minutes ago, this piece of trash, was holding Shinjiqing down and kissing him desperately, deeply defiling the son he had high hopes for. Chu Rao, a troublemaker like you might as well drop out of school early. Yu's malicious words brought me back to my senses. Now these words were nothing but the impotent rage of a defeated opponent to me, and they didn't matter at all. I was just desperately suppressing the urge to rush forward, grab his collar, and question him about Shinjiqing's wounds. He was clearly an only child, from a perfect family with a father in officialdom and a mother in business, a top student admired by everyone. How could he be so badly injured? But I had no right to force an answer. At present, I also had no power or connections to conduct an investigation. 13. Later, when I returned to the classroom, Shinjiqing was lying on the desk, sleeping, glancing at his exposed nape. I couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva and couldn't look away, until my shoulder was suddenly slapped. Brother Rao, do you want to teach that damn top student a lesson? A curly-haired guy sat down next to me, his face full of indignation. I was stunned for a long time before I recognized him as my former loyal little follower, Chung Su, just because I happened to save him once on the way home from school. This guy had followed me for 3 years, some time ago. Chung Su was caught for helping me fight, and his father broke his leg. He had been recuperating at home until now. As a result, this guy couldn't stay quiet at all. As soon as he came to school, he asked me how I wanted to take revenge on Shinjiqing and said he was willing to help. I smiled. I shifted my gaze back to Shinjiqing, my eyes teasing. I really do want to teach him a lesson. As for how to do it, I wanted to pin this hypocritical good guy against the wall and kiss him. Force him to take the initiative to reveal all his secrets, and then bite his nape, and give him a good lesson. The thoughts that I didn't say out loud were really vulgar. In the end, I only dared to ask Ching-su to keep an eye on Shin Jiqing and pay attention to whether he would secretly go to the toilet or the rooftop to inject something. I wanted to know, why was Shin Jiqing, a perfectly normal alpha, with a gland that was so damaged? And why did he have so many injuries? 14. The investigation of the sponsor was put on hold for the time being. I followed Shin Jiqing every day, and finally, I found the syringe he had used in the trash bin of his villa area. There were no words on it, only a few drops of transparent liquid remaining inside. The Shin family owned a pharmaceutical factory. This thing should have been brought back from his mother's laboratory, but the day before the test results came out, Shin Jiqing disappeared. His school bag was on the seat. But he didn't come all morning. I took the 5,000-word self-criticism that I had rushed to finish during 2 Chinese classes and went to the office, but he was nowhere to be seen, until the newspaper reading time in the afternoon. The classmates who didn't go to eat gathered in the corner and discussed in a low voice, "Goodness, that kind of good student is actually in a puppy love. He usually looks so rigid and heartless. He really hides it well. It's not really a puppy love. He hasn't caught up with the person yet. He just secretly wrote a cheesy love letter to confess. Now Teacher Wang and the others will be slapped in the face. The model top student they praised every day has actually committed a major taboo. Ha ha ha. Am I the only one who envies the Omega who received the love letter from the school hunk?" I frowned and listened to the whole process. It all felt so familiar. In the previous life, I found the love letter in Shin Jiqing's drawer and personally reported it to Teacher Wang. I couldn't stand the thought of Shin Jiqing being in a relationship, couldn't stand the thought of him being sweet with some Omega, so I reported him out of revenge. But this time, I clearly didn't do anything. 15. After skipping the evening self-study, I stuffed a section of steel bar into my school bag and climbed over the wall to escape from school. In the previous life, Shin Jiqing didn't come to school for 2 weeks because of the love letter incident. When he came back, he became very gloomy. Every day, he pulled the collar of his school uniform to the top. Besides burying his head and doing exercises, he would lie on the desk and sleep, without saying a word. Even when I occasionally provoked him, he was indifferent. This situation lasted until the end of senior high school. Because of the love letter incident, he never spoke to me again. Now that the old things were repeating themselves, I couldn't accept this ending. Shin Jiqing's home wasn't far from the school. Just across a few streets was the villa area that his mother had specially reserved for him, which was convenient for him and his father to go to school and work. I ran all the way there in a hurry. The single-family villa of the Shin family was indeed lit up. I climbed over the fence and slipped into the yard. Guyu, that old guy, was sitting in the huge living room, sipping tea. The light in Shin Jiqing's study on the second floor was off. I didn't dare to act rashly until Guyu stood up, grabbed a bunch of keys on the coffee table, and walked towards the basement. The ventilation window of his basement was hidden next to the flower bed. I crawled over on my stomach. Just as Guyu turned on the light in the basement, the entire dark space was suddenly illuminated, and I finally saw Shin Jiqing, who was covered in bruises and blood, was huddled in the corner, dying, like a tortured cat. 16. At that moment, it was as if a sharp knife was churning in my heart, deep and heavy, making it hard for me to breathe. There were a lot of torture tools in the basement, like a place for detaining prisoners. I watched helplessly as Guyu picked up the love letter on the ground, read it out with a look of disdain, and then slandered his son with the kind of malicious words he usually used to scold poor, performing students. He said that Shin Jiqing should remember his identity and must eliminate me to get the recommendation quota for a prestigious school. He also said that Shin Jiqing had a twisted mind, was a pervert, and the love letter he wrote was disgusting, and he would never be able to get love in his life. Every word was heart-piercing and tear-jerking. My anger almost burned away my rationality. After that scumbag Guyu finished yelling at Shin Jiqing, he lit a cigarette. The moment the fire was lit, Shin Jiqing's body trembled violently. This scene was clearly seen by Guyu. He took the spark, squatted down in front of Shin Jiqing, and slowly moved the cigarette closer to Shin Jiqing's left arm. Damn it, at that moment, I couldn't hold back anymore. After taking out the steel bar and smashing the ventilation window in front of me, I jumped in and knocked Guyu away with a heavy blow. Then, without fear, I picked up a leather whip and whipped it at his face, venting my anger with one whip after another, until he had no strength to resist, until Shin Jiqing crawled up and tugged at the corner of my clothes, weakly shaking his head at me. I sniffed. picking up the crumpled love letter on the ground. I then picked him up and fled outside. 17. That night, I carried Shinjiching for a long time. I tirelessly rushed to a hospital, accompanied him to treat his wounds, and took him back to my rental house. After we got back, Shinjiching huddled in the corner at the end of the bed, half burying his face to explain, "My parents were very kind to me at first, but later, for some reasons, I became the person they hated the most. When I was 15, my mother used a business trip as an excuse and didn't come home all year round. My father thought I had broken up the family. Later, he became a different person, forcing me to rank first in the grade. If I made any mistakes in any aspect, he would hit me. This isn't just hitting, it's domestic violence." Remembering the wounds and scars on his body, I couldn't help but grab his wrist and ask, Why didn't you call the police? I don't want to cause more trouble for my mother." Shinjiching raised his lifeless eyes. "She has given me enough. Guyu is just bad to me, but he is good to her." I thought, I could endure it a little longer. Endure until the ending of suicide in the previous life. I couldn't tell him, and he wouldn't believe me. The air froze for a long time. Finally, he suddenly smiled at me and murmured, "Chu Rao, thank you for taking me, a person you dislike, home." In a dilapidated tenement building, in a leaky rental house, Shinjiching actually called it home. I felt like laughing a bit, but my nose was so sore that I couldn't control my tears. Tears welled up in my eyes uncontrollably. 18. I heard that Guyu was admitted to the city hospital that night. He took a month's leave and didn't dare to call the police to make a big deal out of this. I wanted to report it, but Shinjiching, who was lying sick in bed, stopped me and mercilessly drove me away. He said that the patient needed to rest quietly and didn't want to see me wandering around all day, listening to my nagging, and eating the unpalatable things I cooked. I almost laughed out of anger. I wanted to confront him, but was stopped by his weak breathing. It was like a fishbone stuck in my throat. In the past, I always expected Shinjiching to fall from his pedestal, hoping to see him no longer arrogant and in a sorry state. Now that this day had really come, Shinjiching's perfect family was fake. Getting the first place in the grade easily was fake. He was usually domestic violence ed and mentally oppressed, and his life was even worse than mine. An orphan, with such a result. I didn't feel the slightest bit of pleasure. My strange heart only produced dull pains, making me extremely uncomfortable. "Chu Rao, Shinjiching suddenly raised his eyes from his arms and said in a muffled voice, "Thank you for taking me in. When I recover from my injuries and go back, I'll pay you back." I was a bit speechless and waved my hand, saying I didn't care. For the 28-year-old me, money had long been an external thing. And those things that I had always been thinking about but never obtained were the ones worth cherishing. "Then what do you care about?" "I just want." I bent down to tie my shoelaces. When I looked up, I suddenly met a pair of eyes as gentle as spring water, hazy and affectionate, captivating. They were extremely similar to the face that I couldn't have in countless midnight dreams in the previous life, like a vague and extravagant hope. "Why do you have so many questions? Go back and lie down and have a good rest." I hurriedly made up an excuse, slung my school bag over my shoulder, and rushed out of the door. And on the outside of the iron door, I couldn't help but cover my mouth and swallow a mouthful of saliva, trying to suppress the impetuous alpha pheromones, and my thumping heartbeat. 19. The fact that I skipped class wasn't discovered. Recently, due to the seasonal flu, many people asked for leave, so Teacher Wang didn't notice me either. But during the PE class, Chingsu came to me with a big smile, taking credit. "Brother Rao, haven't you been much more at ease recently? Although I couldn't fight for you recently, I indirectly got rid of that annoying guy for you. Look, now no one catches you for skipping class or being late, and old Guyu has also taken leave to go home to teach his son a lesson." I suddenly stood up. "What did you say?" "It's about that love letter. Thanks to you, Brother Rao, for asking me to keep an eye on Shinjiching. I had the chance to find his love letter and report it. Damn it." The vocabulary book in my hand fell to the ground with a snap, scaring Chingsu into stammering. What's wrong, Brother Rao? Isn't he your sworn enemy? Why do you look so angry?" "How could I not be angry?" I grabbed Chingsu's shoulders and roared, "You idiot, do you know?" The swear word stuck in my throat. He didn't know the consequences of the report. And neither did I in the previous life, and I, who had done the same stupid thing, what right did I have to scold him, with nowhere to vent my anger? I was so angry that I shook him off and slapped myself twice. Then, ignoring the looks of others who thought I was crazy, I squatted in a corner and took out the love letter in my pocket. I had seen this thing in Shinjiching's drawer 2 days ago. I originally thought that as long as I suppressed my jealousy and inexplicable discomfort, this life ignored it and pretended not to see it, but unexpectedly, I still indirectly caused him harm in the end. I smoothed out the crumpled letter paper. The sunlight shone on the elegant and beautiful words, and I just felt it was too dazzling to look at. I folded it in half and stuffed it into a pure, white envelope, but when sealing it, the wax seal accidentally fell to the ground, and a small line of black words was suddenly revealed: Chu Rao, to receive, 20. It was slightly cool at night, and the dim incandescent lamp was swaying in the rental house. I paced back and forth downstairs in the tenement building, looking at the dim light, hesitant to move forward. I read the blurred name under the wax seal 30 times and asked all the classmates around me. Everyone said that the 2 words were Chu Rao. It wasn't my eyes playing tricks, it really said, Chu Rao, to receive. Just those 3 words and the like in the first line of the love letter had already burned all my brain cells, making me feel dazed like an idiot all afternoon. Finally, I couldn't help but skip the evening self-study and had been wandering downstairs until now. My heart was almost jumping out of my chest. The emotions that had been on the verge of bursting out but always puzzling me were instantly relieved when I saw the word like. It turned out that in the previous life, I didn't hate Shinjiching to the bone when I dreamed of him repeatedly. It was the despicable me who, because I couldn't reach him and love him, put a hat called hatred on it and turned my grief and indignation into motivation. Now, after 2 lifetimes of reincarnation, I didn't know what kind of attitude to take to respond to Shinjiching, until in the 3rd hour of blowing the cold wind, there was suddenly a series of loud noises from upstairs, accompanied by Shinjiching's heavy gasps. 21. When I rushed into the rental house, Shinjiching was lying on the ground in a disheveled state, with a thin layer of sweat on his fair skin, and his body was still trembling slightly. My heart tightened suddenly. I rushed forward and carried him back to the bed, and then I was about to escape guiltily. Is it your susceptible period? There's an inhibitor in the drawer. I'll get it for you. No. Shinjiching suddenly hooked his arms around my neck and shook his head weakly next to my ear. It's not the susceptible period, it's. His ambiguous gasps almost poured into my heart. I leaned over his neck and swallowed hard, then said hoarsely, if it's not the susceptible period, then what is it? Shinjiching's eyes were red from holding back, and he still gritted his teeth and shook his head, his voice almost tinged with sobs. Chu Rao, you mark me. I really can't take it anymore. It's so uncomfortable, Before he could finish speaking, I eagerly kissed him. I held him and kissed him inseparably, and finally, I revealed the violent nature of an alpha, impatiently tearing open his collar to occupy his territory. When my canine teeth pierced that soft flesh, I thought randomly, even if I couldn't really possess him, even if our natures repelled each other, it didn't matter. Before the word matter could come to my mind, when my alpha pheromones smoothly melted into his blood, all the pessimistic thoughts in my mind came to an abrupt end. I froze in place, listening to Shinjiching's unbearable voice beside my ear. I finally realized in a daze, I actually, really marked Shinjiching, an alpha. 22. After the marking was over, Shinjiching fell asleep directly. His body was still a little hot, and I stayed by the bed and changed the ice towel for him all night, thinking about taking him to see a doctor when he woke up. How could an alpha be marked by another alpha? There must be something wrong with Shinjiching's gland, but before he woke up, the hospital called and urged me to pick up the test results of the syringe. I could barely understand the test report, but I couldn't believe it. It said that the liquid in the syringe was a compound reagent that could make an omega exhibit the sexual characteristics of an alpha and also inhibit its own estrus period. This thing was currently a clinical drug and was not available on the market at all. The doctor also said that it had great side effects, and if used too much, it could be fatal. I blankly thought of the previous life. After Shinjiching lost that crucial competition, he coldly said congratulations to me in front of the school leaders and walked past me without looking back. I had once firmly believed that it was a sarcasm and that I was just lucky to get the recommendation, but after being reborn, I found out Shinjiching's blessing was sincere, and that recommendation opportunity was something he had known he was going to die from the beginning, and he took the initiative to withdraw and leave it to me. 23. When I rushed back to the rental house with the test report, there were a large group of bodyguards in suits downstairs. I pushed through the crowd and squeezed in. I saw Shinjiching following a woman in a high-end custom-made suit. He only stopped when he turned around and saw me. He said something to the woman, then came close and pulled me to a corner where no one was around, and stuffed a bank card into my hand. He said on his own, "The money in here is what my father owes you. I know he deliberately brushed off your poverty alleviation funds. I'm sorry, you've already said you're sorry." I took out the love letter I carried with me. There are a lot of explanations about the misunderstandings between us in here. It's a suicide note that you wrote to me but didn't intend to give to me, right? When Shinjiqing saw the fallen wax seal, his pupils suddenly shrank. How did you? Of course I know, Shinjiqing. I couldn't help but choke a little. You want to explain all the misunderstandings between us, but you think I hate you, so you only dared to hide my name under the wax seal. The reason you said your parents hated you was that you differentiated into an omega at the age of 15, and they kept making you take the reagent to disguised as an alpha. In fact, you were forced to the point where you couldn't live anymore, so you would provoke me to participate in the competition and give me the recommendation quota, planning to use your death to revenge your father. Enough. Shinjiqing shook off my hand, bit his pale lips, and sneered disdainfully. Chu Rao, do you have any evidence for what you said? Do you want to threaten me for money, or, I want you? He froze in place, dumbfounded. I pressed on, advancing step by step. Do you understand? Shinjiqing, I said, it's so coincidental. I like you too. The wind brewed in early spring was a bit astringent, but it suddenly melted Shinjiqing's eyes that were as cold as ice for thousands of years. Finally, he showed a bit of emotion. I know the love letter was for me, and I also know that the person who secretly sponsored me for 2 years was you. Stop being stubborn, it's useless, Shinjiqing. Trust me, I can save you. Come with me. Let me make it up to you and take care of you for the rest of my life. Just give me a chance, okay? 24. Shinjiqing didn't come with me. He hesitated for a moment, but finally took 2 steps back and twitched his lips. Even if I like you, what qualifications do you have now to make me trust you and feel at ease to leave with you? After he left, I froze in place for a long time. I thought he was right. At present, as a loser among alphas, I really didn't have the qualifications and wasn't worthy of him, but Shinjiqing lied to me. He didn't come with me. Definitely not because he didn't believe me. It was because he was afraid of dragging me down. 25. Guyu wasn't a person who would easily let things go. Last time I beat him so badly, he didn't dare to call the police to arrest me for a while, but he would definitely take revenge on me. I soon waited for this day. When that group of familiar yellow-haired guys blocked me in the alley on the way home again, I smiled and thought, as expected, they were indeed sent by Guyu to block me and provoke me on purpose, trying to completely ruin me, just to make Shinjiqing, this exam-taking tool, become the unique top student and win that so-called face for him. Chu Rao, what the hell are you laughing at? You beat my brothers so badly last time. This time it's your turn to atone for your sins. The leader of the hooligans punched me as he spoke, but I dodged it sideways. I took off my school bag and didn't fight back. I still smiled and said, "How much money did Guyu give you? I'll pay double, fuck you." When I opened the zipper of the school bag, the swear word stopped abruptly. The school bag I brought today was filled with a bag full of cash. Still want to fight? If not, let's talk about a cooperation. 26. I gave them a 10,000 yuan deposit and asked them to beat me to death. The only requirement was to run to the Shin family to inform Guyu and then pretend to accidentally reveal it to Shinjiqing. Last time I asked him if he knew why I fought, and he must have privately investigated who these hooligans were. And it wouldn't be difficult for him to find out that it was Guyu. I wanted Shinjiqing to know, not only him. But I was also deeply harmed. He was a typical person with a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Even if he could endure it himself, he definitely couldn't bear to see the person he liked being tortured and having a life worse than death. When Shinjiqing rushed to the scene, I spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. The hooligans beat me half to death, while kicking me. They cursed me as trash and said they would kill me according to the employer's instructions. When Shinjiqing pushed them away with red eyes and picked me up, he was almost on the verge of collapse. To make the effect realistic, all the injuries were real beatings, and the blood was also from me biting my tongue on purpose. I pretended to be strong, raised my hand, stroked his chin, and comforted him while spitting blood. It's okay. If you want to endure, I'll endure with you. They can't kill me. Cough, cough. The blood I coughed up stained his blue and white school uniform and also seeped into the bandage on his wrist. On the verge of losing consciousness, Shinjiqing's hands were shaking uncontrollably. Finally, he shook his head with a sob. I'll call the police, I will, Chu Rao, I'll come with you, please don't die, don't sleep. 27. When I woke up again, I was in a hospital full of the smell of disinfectant. The moment I felt my hand being tightly held, I knew I had won the bet. Later, after my wounds healed, I went to the detention center. I took out 100,000 yuan to seal the mouths of those hooligans and also went to see Gu Yu, this culprit who embezzled, committed domestic violence, and instigated minors to commit crimes. He was so angry that he gritted his teeth and still had the nerve to threaten that he would never let me and Shin Jiqing go when he got out. I fake-heartedly said, I'm so scared. Then I spent a high price to hire a lawyer and asked him to make Gu Yu be punished for multiple crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment. On the day the trial ended, Shin Jiqing's mother also came. She didn't know the suffering Shin Jiqing had endured over the years. After learning the truth, she was very heartbroken, but it was only that the side effect free conversion agents she brought back had already caused irreversible harm to Shin Jiqing's body and mind. 28. When everything was settled, I took Shin Jiqing and transferred to another school, going to Yunqing, which was tens of thousands of miles away from Nanqing. We rented an apartment near the school there and started anew. His scars gradually healed, and his gland also improved to some extent under the treatment of medicine, restoring the sexual characteristics of an omega. The night I smelled his real pheromones, I turned my back and licked my fangs, silently reciting the great compassion mantra in my heart. As a result, this person was completely unaware. After taking a bath, he casually put on a bath towel and came out, exposing a large area of his fair collarbone. Do you want to bite? Shin Jiqing's overly straightforward words made me stumble and almost fall, but his face was calm, and he even lifted the bath towel and came closer to pin me against the wall. If you want to bite, then come on, it's not the first time anyway.